Outside, the rain draped over the mountain road like a heavy silver curtain. Its drops pounded against the hood in a steady rhythm enough to make you forget what time it was. You were driving your old pickup down an empty mountain pass. Having left town close to midnight, no real reason for the trip, just a need for silence. You told your coworkers you needed some mountain air. Now you had it all. Mountains, rain, thunder, and solitude. Your headlights swept across the pines, mist rising like breath. The wind hissed gently against the glass. No one was out at this hour, until you slammed the brakes. A dark shape stood in the middle of the road. At first you thought it was a fallen log, but it moved. A bear. Not as big as the ones you'd seen in travel magazines, but not exactly a plush toy either. It stood there in the rain, staring at you through the wet windshield, silent, still unmoving. You leaned forward, switched on the high beams, hoping the noise would scare it off. But it didn't move. It just looked at you, and that's when you saw something strange. Its eyes were wet, not from the rain, but from something deeper: fear. Worry? A silent plea. You weren't sure. But for a moment, you swear something passed through you straight from those eyes. Bears don't do this. Bears avoid people. Bears run. But this one came closer. You cracked the window open. Rain slapped your cheek like ice. Its breathing was heavy, horse-like. It carried miles of weariness in its chest. And then it turned, walking slowly toward the woods. But not away. Not completely. Every few steps it looked back at you. Once, twice, 3 times. You knew this was reckless, insane, and absolutely not advised. But you grabbed your flashlight, opened the door, and stepped out, because you couldn't not follow those eyes. Some encounters aren't coincidence. They come from something deeper, like fate placing you exactly where you're needed. Stepped carefully along the muddy trail, flashlight trembling in your hand. The wind hissed through trees soaked with moss and rot. Every step took you deeper into the unknown, and sure what waited ahead. The bear kept walking, just a few steps ahead. It didn't run. It didn't rush. Every now and then, it glanced back just enough for you to catch those round black eyes glowing in your light, as if to say, "Keep going, I'm leading you." You were breathing hard now from the cold. From nerves, the rain had calmed, but the wind kept cutting. You didn't know what you were following. Maybe it was that gaze. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was because you'd never seen a wild creature move with such urgent human purpose. 10 minutes later, the bear stopped by a low thicket. At first you saw nothing, until you heard it. A soft, weak whimper. You pointed the light down and your heart broke. A cub, soaked to the bone, curled beneath the brush. Its fur was matted, brown, clumped together. It shivered violently. One leg swollen and bleeding. You dropped to your knees. The flashlight shook in your hands. The big bear, maybe a sibling, maybe just older, stood beside you. Not growling. Not afraid. Just ... watching. Waiting. And in that haze of confusion and emotion, you heard yourself whisper, "All right, I'll help, but you've got to let me get close. Okay?" You reached into your coat pocket, pulled out a butter cracker. You'd forgotten, since the gas station. The bear sniffed, but didn't lunge. Instead, it backed off, just enough for you to step toward the cub. You swear the little bear lifted its head, just a bit, as if it understood you might be its only chance. You took off your jacket, gently wrapping it around the cub. It was lighter than you expected. You heard its breathing right next to your ear, thin, weak, like a child worn out from fever. When you stood up, the big bear didn't stop you. It followed you back quietly, closely like a silent escort all the way to the truck. You opened the door, laid the cub gently on the passenger seat, and pulled a spare blanket from the back. You looked up, wanting to see if the other bear was still there. It stood at the forest's edge, watching, not moving. You raised your hand in a simple wave, meaningless, but honest. The bear didn't wave back, but it dipped its head and stepped into the dark. You never knew an animal's eyes could hold memory long enough to remember kindness. and strong enough to lead you exactly where you were meant to be. You couldn't drive back to town. The nearest one was more than 30 miles through forest roads. No cell service at that tiny wooden cabin you called home on the weekends. Tonight, it had become an emergency clinic. You wrapped the cub tightly in an old towel and laid it beside the wood-burning stove. The small room smelled faintly of smoke, pine sap, and stale coffee clinging to the timbered walls. The cub was still breathing weak, but steady. You grabbed the first aid kit from the wooden cupboard, your hands trembling as you cleaned its wounds. When you touched its injured leg, it let out the softest whimper, but it didn't bite, didn't claw. Instead, it nudged its head gently into the crook of your arm, like it was searching for warmth. You swear that was the moment your heart melted like butter in a hot skillet. You found an old jar of honey, mixed it with warm water, and offered it by the spoonful. To your surprise, it licked slowly, delicately. There was something in those tiny eyes that made you stain, because it was a wild animal, but because it looked at you the way humans look when they need someone near midnight. You lay on the couch next to the fire, a thin blanket over your shoulders. The wood crackled. The wind moaned through the cabin walls. The cub slept quietly now, its breathing calm. You didn't know if it would make it through the night, but you'd done everything you could. You turned toward the wind. A mist had swallowed the forest, but you felt it, a presence. You stepped onto the porch, cold air slicing across your cheek, and there it was. The bigger bear standing just beyond the tree line, watching the cabin. Watching you. You didn't move, didn't call, just looked. It didn't move. Either the two of you stood there, both silent sentries, guarding a fragile little life. You don't remember what you thought in that moment, only what you felt, not fear. Something closer to trust. No one else saw it, but you did. And so did those eyes. That night, deep in the frozen woods, weren't truly alone. The next morning, you woke to a soft, rustling sound, not from the forest, but from right beneath your couch. The cub was stirring, its eyes opened, slowly shimmering like drops of amber, still lit by the last memory of firelight. You sat up. "Good morning, kid," you whispered, your voice hoarse. It blinked, then stretched its neck and rested its head gently against your leg. You swear you smiled like a child seeing snow for the first time. You warmed some oatmeal, mixed in honey, and set it by its side. The cub didn't devour it, just licked, slow and steady. Its eyes never left yours, and sometimes you caught yourself thinking, "It's like he's reading my thoughts." You didn't leave the cabin for 3 whole days. You cared for it the way a man who's lived too long alone learns to be gentle again. You gave it a name, nothing fancy, just Cub, because that's what it was, a little one. By day, you cleared the yard, chopped wood, fixed the window rattled. Loose by last week's storm, every time you turned your back, you'd find Cub watching you. Sometimes it wandered over, sniffed the hammer or a paint can, then looked at you like, "What's this thing do?" You laughed. One time you nearly slipped hand. Cub stood upright on 2 feet, eyes wide in alarm. You blurted out, "What was that? You trying to catch me, huh?" You swear it raised an eyebrow. Or maybe just twitched its nose right on cue. Never thought you'd end up talking this much to a bear. On the 4th night, you stayed up late by the window. The mist hung heavy as ever. But then you saw it again, that same silhouette, the big bear. Still watching, still waiting, never coming closer, never leaving like it was guarding, or waiting for something. You whispered through the fogged glass, "Don't worry, he's okay." You weren't sure it could hear, but you were sure it understood. There are creatures in this world that don't speak our language, but know how to listen straight to the heart. You used to think the woods were a lonely place, until a bear cub started wandering your backyard like it owned the land, and a silent guardian, his mother, maybe stood always at the edge of the trees, never crossing the line, never fully vanishing. One morning, you woke to a strange clatter outside. Thought it was the wind. You opened the door and froze. Cub stood there, a stick of dry wood clamped in its mouth. It dropped it at your feet like a gift. You laughed. I don't know if you understand the idea of gratitude, kid, but thanks. In the days that followed, the gifts kept coming. A messy pile of ferns. A dead squirrel, yeah. You buried that one. Cub looked disappointed. KOB piece of amber-colored barbecue kept that one. Strangely, Cub never strayed too far. And the most remarkable part? Whenever Cub stayed close, so did the big bear. She never interfered, never came near the cabin. But on nights when you forgot to draw the curtains, you'd catch a pair of gleaming eyes between the trees. You started feeling safer, even if you didn't know why. One afternoon, while sawing wood, the blade jammed. You twisted, lost your footing, and slipped down the slope behind the cabin. Rocks clattered. Pain shot up your leg. Before you could call for help, Cub appeared, silent.com, just looking into your eyes. Then it turned, walked a few steps, looked back. What? You leading me now? You dragged yourself after it, pain jolting with. Every step, Cub waited every few feet, patient as a guide. When you finally reached the front porch, you collapsed, and you swear the big bear melted into the woods that very moment. Not gone, just like smoke. You lay on the cabin floor, ankle wrapped in ice, your heartbeat finally slowing. Cub curled beside you, head resting on your boot. You reached out, ran your hand through its rough fur. It closed its eyes. No fear, no tension, as if you were part of its pack. You don't always realize it, but sometimes the creatures you save are the very ones teaching you how to be loved again. You don't remember exactly what felt off that morning. Maybe it was just the sky grayer than usual. The mist lingered longer on the glass, and Cub wasn't in the yard like he always was. You stirred the fire, opened the door, looked around. No. Soft footsteps crunching over leaves. No pair of brown eyes peeking out from behind the woodpile. Nothing. A long, hollow silence followed. Something had shifted, something subtle, but undeniable. Like the rhythm of the forest had skipped a beat. Called out 3 times, "Cub." Only the echo answered back. You went inside, poured yourself a cup of coffee, and just then something small, but enough to freeze you in place. The back door, slightly open. You were sure you'd latched it. Your cabin sat 3 miles deep into the forest. You never forgot that. You stepped outside, each footfall cautious. The grass was wet, but there were no human prints. Just a faint drag mark. Like something or someone had been pulled, and that trail led into the trees. Hesitated, and grabbed your flashlight and heavy coat. If it's Cub, you thought he wouldn't leave on his own. You followed the trail. It deepened with every step, and suddenly you heard it, a growl. It's not loud, but not Cub's. It was the sound of a full-grown bear. It's not a roar to threaten, but a warning. You froze. Up ahead, past a thick row of trees, lay a sunken clearing, and in the center was Cub. He was thrashing, one leg caught in an old rusted bear trap. You ran. It's okay, it's okay. What are you doing here, kid? Cub whimpered, his eyes wide with pain. You dropped to your knees, tried prying the jaws open with a stick, but it was clamped like steel. Then from across the clearing, a shadow surged forward. The mother bear. You fell backward by instinct, every muscle locked in place. She towered over you, nearly 2 meters tall, fur bristling, eyes flushed red and gar. Fear, you thought. If she thinks I'm hurting him, this is it. But she didn't roar. She whined, a low, aching sound, then bent her head and licked the blood from Cub's leg, and looked at you, not with rage. With pleading, you broke down, not even sure why. Your hands trembled as you tried the trap again. This time with all your weight. You forced it open. Cub pulled free. The mother let out a low growl, not a threat, but something like, "Go." Cub limped forward, but stopped, turned back. Looked at you. You reached out and touched his head. "I'm sorry, you didn't deserve this." You returned to the cabin long after sunset. Your throat dry, hands stained with blood. The wind blew through the trees. For the first time, it didn't smell like pine or firewood. It smelled like iron and fear. Sometimes the only thing that gives you courage is the gaze of a creature who can't speak but somehow knows you're the last one left to trust. You'd lived in the woods long enough to know when trees go quiet for wind, and when they go quiet for something else. 3 days passed. No sign of cub, no sign of the mother, no sound at night except the leaves falling. You started to feel uneasy, not afraid, exactly. Just empty. It's like something you didn't know you could miss had been taken back by the forest. Like the wild had reclaimed what it once let you borrow. You packed a flashlight, slung a knife on your belt, and told yourself you'd only go a little deeper. Just to be sure. It's not out of worry. No, you insisted just to need to know. You left a note on the wooden table. Habit, when living alone, headed to Dry Basin. Back before sundown? But you didn't make it back by sundown. By the time you realized how far you'd gone, the rain had started. The flashlight flickered, mud sucked at your boots, and then something small underfoot made you slip. You didn't know how many times you rolled, only the pain. Sharp rocks tearing your arms. One brutal slam to the shoulder. The last thing you saw was branches clawing at the sky. Then nothing. You woke in cold, or at darkness. Everything was still. To still, your shoulder throbbed, probably dislocated. Your hands crusted with dried blood. Worst of all, had no idea where you were. You tried to stand. Pain shot through your right leg. Broken? Sprained? Every step felt like someone was pulling cords inside your knee. You stumbled, called out for Cub. Only your own voice came back. Somewhere, water dripped inside the stone. That's when it hit you. You were in a cave. Small, narrow, damp. No idea how you got in. No idea how to get out. And unless someone passed this way, you fell silent. No phone. No GPS. No rescue. You muttered. Have to stay sane. Have to fend off fear. Great job, Leo. Went looking for a bear now. You're the one in a cage. You swear you heard the rocks behind you snicker. You dropped your head into your hands. Everything ached. Your vision blurred cold. Blood loss. Maybe both. And for the first time in years, you thought, maybe this is where I die. No sign. No light. No sound. Just the forest, silent, distant, indifferent. Not every storm starts with thunder. Some begin with a single drop, falling in a night that seemed peaceful. You don't remember when you passed out? Only that when you woke again, it was darker, not because the night had deepened, but because the fog had crept into the cave thick. Like breath from the mouth of something ancient and waiting, you tried to move. Your hand was swollen, your shoulders screamed. Every twitch stabbed like fire behind your eyes. You thought about everything, the cabin, the half-drunk coffee, the note on the table, and those brown eyes once lit by the fireplace glow. You laughed bitter. Broken. God, I'm losing it, thinking about a bear cub right now. Then a noise. Soft, scraping stone. You froze. No flashlight left. Only a weak silver sliver of moonlight through a crack in the rocks. You whispered, "Hello?" No reply, but the sound continued. And then from that darkness, a small, shaggy shape appeared. Cub, he didn't make a sound, just looked at you. Stepped forward, slow and careful, stopped a few feet away. You choked out, "How? How did you find me?" He moved closer. His eyes caught the moonlight. Then he turned, looked toward the rock crevice. Moments later, a second sound. A low rumbling. Breath, she was there. The mother you froze in disbelief. No idea how. No clue why. But somehow, they'd found you. Cub nudged your shoulder with his head, urging you up. You groaned. But he didn't stop. He ran to the crevice, circled back, calling you without a word. The mother bear stood by the entrance, blocking the wind and the cold. You crawled up. Every step was pain. But Cub never left your side. He waited at every bend, looking back like, "I'm here. Just keep going." It wasn't easy. You slipped, almost fell. But Cub circled behind, let you lean on him, a brace against his side. You couldn't believe it. Two wild creatures quiet. Wild and certain, trying to keep you alive. When the light finally broke through the tree's faint, far off you were, nearly done. But Cub didn't let you fall. He pulled a branch oak, half dry, and pushed it into your arms. Like he was saying, "Hold on, don't give up," you cried, collapsed onto a rock, gasping. Cub sat beside you. The mother stood tall on the ridge above. The wind stirred again. This time it wasn't cold. You looked at Cub, didn't need words, and Cub, as if he understood everything, lowered his head and gently touched your hand. Maybe kindness is the only thing in this world that always remembers its way back, even when you forget it ever existed. You don't know how long you sat on that cold rock. All you remember is Cub still beside you, quiet as a warm shadow, and the mother bear standing a little farther away, like some ancient walking tree, steady, silent, watching the sky begin to lighten. Single thread of silver tore through the mist, as if the world itself was opening its eyes after a long, dark nightmare. You tried to breathe deep. The pain was still there, but less. Your head was no longer spinning. Cub licked your wrist gently then, without warning, leapt up onto a rock, and let out a short, sharp howl. You startled, and then you heard it. A sound you hadn't heard in days. A distant engine, not loud but clear. Real Cub turned to you. You didn't need to ask. You understood. You tore the scarf from your neck muddy, torn, but still red enough to catch the eye, tied it to a dry branch, lifted it higher than your body wanted to allow. Pain shot through your leg like broken glass.
Ah.
The mother bear stepped closer. She stood behind you, not touching, not pressing, but close enough for you to feel. Something solid at your back. Something grounding. You raised the branch, waving it, shouting your name into the trees like a man yelling from inside a dream. "Help, I'm here. Over here." And then a voice shouted back, "Hey, over." There's someone. Couldn't tell how many. But minutes later, shapes emerged. High-waist jackets, flashlights, headlamps, boots crunching over dry grass like the sound of your heartbeat coming home. They ran toward you. You yelled out, "Careful, there's a bear," but Cub had already stepped back. So had the mother. No roars, no lunges, no threats, just presence, watching. One rescuer dropped beside you, lowering you gently to sit, shouting into his radio, "We found Leo Barnes, late 30s, significant blood loss, right shoulder and leg injury, requesting stretcher immediately." "I repeat, we found him," you croaked out, barely audible. "They found me, not you. They found me." Team didn't understand. He looked around and then saw Cub. A man chuckled. "You got rescued by a wild animal, huh?" Nodded, your lips trembling. "Not an animal, a friend." Cub looked at you one last time, his eyes bright, alive. The rising sun caught his fur, turning it golden, like a streak of autumn light. The mother turned first back into the woods. Cub hesitated. 1 beat. 2. Then he followed, disappearing into the forest like a dream that never wanted to be remembered. No tracks, no sound. Only a man on a stretcher, eyes wet, clutching a torn, filthy scarf, as if it was the last proof that miracles leave fingerprints. You don't need to know why a miracle comes. You just need to be kind enough for it to want to return. You spent nearly 2 weeks in the hospital. The news picked up the story. The rescue. How you'd gone missing for almost 4 days. In a wildlife reserve that should have only taken one to survey. The papers ran headlines like, "Forestry Ranger Leo Barnes, miraculous." Survival in the frozen backcountry. They talked about helicopters, rescue teams. Wah, gah, a crumpled map found in your coat pocket. But no one, not one headline mentioned Cub